Good afternoon. As we are waiting for people to enter the Zoom, I want to welcome everybody today to our second TPE Story Short, Managing from the Middle, Motivation During Difficult Times, and the opportunity to hear from a manager who is leading her team during what I think we all can agree on has been a difficult year. I'll introduce her here in a moment. Welcome today. My name is Kirsten Fox. I'm the director of TPE and look forward to this new program. Like I said, this is our second TPE Story Short. It is a new bi-monthly program that we will be offering our TPE constituents. And with that, I want to get right into the story and introduce today's storyteller. Christy Anglade is the Director of Housing and Residential Education at Emerson College in Boston. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to her. Before I do that, just a few housekeeping notes. I should have said that earlier. Please feel free to use the question and answer to write questions, as well as the chat, but if you could put them in the Q&A, we can make sure that I can get them to Christy. She will give her brief story, and then at the end, we will turn it back over to the questions so she can also answer your questions. So thanks again for joining us today. And with that, I will turn it over to Christy to do a little bit more of a formal introduction of herself. Thank you, Christy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christy Anglade. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and it is my pleasure to be the Director of Housing and Residential Education at Emerson. I actually joined the team in November of 2019, so it has been an exciting first year. As we're talking about working with unmotivated staff here, I think it's important to acknowledge that we're not talking about staff that are lazy or untrained or burnt out, have toxic behaviors, etc. It's really just about talking about staff who are human in a really unprecedented time. It's about people just trying to survive and hold it together when they're scared for their health, the health of their loved ones, the security of their jobs, their ability to support themselves and their families. They're watching family, friends, peers around them within and outside student affairs be furloughed, laid off, or continue working in conditions that they may question the safety of. And really that kind of almost that dark and dismal uncertainty of the future and how to exist in operating with that. And I think a lot of my team really struggled with knowing even what exactly to hope for. Do you hope that you keep your job and you're working so that you still get paid? Or do you hope that you're furloughed so you don't have to go into work because you don't feel safe going into that condition? And one of my team members said something to me relatively early on in March, and they said, you know, I understand that I'm an adult, but I see you more as a real adult. And this is the first time in my life that adults, leaders, etc., do not have the answers and cannot look me in the eye and say that everything is going to be okay. And kind of supporting your staff during that struggle is a really unique experience, not just when, you know, being like me when I was very new to the position and still building some of those relationships, but also recognizing when the entire team and myself were in very high demand. Students and families want answers that we simply didn't have. The enemy is somewhat invisible, so there's no one really to blame, and therefore sometimes the frontline workers end up taking a lot of that blame. I think we all thought a little earlier on that things would wrap themselves up a little bit more in the short term, and then you get that realization that we'll be living with some aspects of this for quite some time. And then any issue that you have as an institution, as a nation, whatever, it's just emphasized and highlighted. Systemic racism, sexism, inequities in healthcare systems. And then every resource that you would normally be able to lean on was tapped and worn very thin. So when we think of just an overall like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological, safety, love and belonging, self-esteem, self-actualization, every tier is really significantly at risk or actually harmed. And a colleague of mine and I had done a presentation in previous years about how to function when your Maslow's is out of whack. And we talked a lot about the struggle of new professionals and some of the disconnect that occurs between a new professional and your higher and more seasoned administration. But when everyone's Maslow is out of whack, it seems nearly impossible to really center oneself and still function. So what I try to do is just come from the perspective of just acknowledging the personal challenges that staff are facing outside of their position as a whole. And while I think sometimes it goes without saying that everyone is struggling, I felt like my team really needed to physically hear me say it, acknowledge it more than once, and to normalize that it was okay to not always be okay. And I felt that they really related better to me when I acknowledged when I was struggling as well, when I shared what I did to kind of find what I found useful about re-energizing, giving me strength, and kind of helping me keep the momentum to continue to push through. I'm very action-oriented and very solution-oriented, so I wanted to be kind of involved wherever I could be involved. So I said yes to every COVID-19 related committee, discussion, etc. Since I was still newer to my role, there were some folks who I met for the first time in a Zoom meeting that I still had not met yet on campus. So a lot of what I tried to do was prove my worth and competence in a meeting and provide context and a frame of reference for the residential experience on our campus. I came as prepared as I could. I always had questions, I had ideas, suggestions, and I tried to be as well versed in everything about our campus numbers, our capacity, etc., so to be really effective in our planning. For my staff, I really tried to give the space for them to talk, ask questions, vent, and express frustration. There's really just never enough hours in the day, but my team really needed FaceTime with me and with our leadership. They needed to be able to ask questions, and some of the wild questions, to vent, express frustration, and they needed me to provide the space to do that. And it seemed like anytime any kind of email sent out, or if I said, oh, hey, I want to try to meet with you all tomorrow, everyone thought that, you know, tomorrow was the day that they were going to all be fired or laid off. And I had to kind of give a little bit of context to everything to make sure that they had an idea of what they were walking into, since they were so much on edge. I did have to ask our group for a lot of patience and grace. And I think this is something we continually ask for. You know, I think it was the president of our institution said that we were riding a bike while building it. So no college has ever done this before, and we have to really remain really flexible and adaptable and just acknowledge that things are going to change quickly and frequently. So in a world where I think a lot of folks appreciate some concretes and some definites, this is just a time where we don't have quite as much of that to give, but we're going to provide as much support as we can. I also try to be very cognizant and clear about what I could do and what I didn't think I could do, or what I wouldn't be able to do. So I could usually share a lot of concepts, ideas, and thought processes, you know, as I talked about where our decisions were leaning. I usually couldn't share a lot of confidential information, so I was really honored and excited to be part of a lot of high-level conversations, but I couldn't share like the college's financial details. I couldn't share really specifically what was said in a meeting or exactly who said it. And I needed my peers on the director level, and I needed folks that are in our leadership to feel that they could communicate with me safely, and that I wouldn't really villainize them or other individuals or offices by sharing too many specifics without enough context. And at the same time, I needed my team to realize and understand that I would share as much information as I was able to do so, as I was safely able to do. And my staff needed to really feel that I was considering them, and considering all the ripple effects of decisions, the aspects of safety and security, their personal well-being, that of our students, etc. I did learn a lot to not assume that folks had more information than they do. So when you are wrapped up in, as so many folks were, COVID-19 related meetings every single day of the week, you do end up becoming almost a little bit of a mini expert. And I had so many meetings with experts from all over the college, from epidemiologists, et cetera, that knowledge really produced a great level of confidence in me regarding our ability to be able to function successfully for this fall. And I had to remember that I needed to share a lot of that knowledge, since information changed so quickly and frequently, to help build that level of confidence in my team. I thought it was also very important and critical to advocate for my team frequently, loudly, repetitively, and also to let my team know when I did advocate for them. So in a lot of decision-making or heavily influential committees or meetings, there are just very few people who understand the day-to-day roles, the intricacy of each of your team members. And it's really easy, especially if you have staff that live on campus at a time where very few people are in person on campus. It's easy to be like, well, you know, they're already here. They're already on a duty rotation. They already live here. They can take on this responsibility. They can take on that action. And you want to be a team player, but you also want to make sure that you are not overwhelming your staff, and you can't burn your staff into the ground too early. So I felt like I had a delicate balance of making sure I helped everyone else see their positions and their experience as very real. So we broke down, so okay, if this is what we're asking a staff member to do, this is actually what the nitty gritty and the step-by-step of that looks like. Are we still comfortable asking that, understanding that? Asking tough questions, recommending solutions or alternatives when it doesn't really seem like it's very well balanced. And then on the flip side, I had to also let my staff know the thought process, the context, the why, and how we ended up landing on the decisions that we ended up landing on. And while they weren't always necessarily thrilled, I think, with the total outcome, they were definitely happier. Once they could see where we started versus where we ended up, I think they were seeing that it was significantly better than where we could have been. And I just try to ask the staff not to do something that I am not comfortable doing. And it needs to be more than just a thought process of like, would I be actually try to do some of those activities? So I find that staff feels motivated when they feel protected, but also when they feel that they're not alone. And that safety is more than just PPE. It's the knowledge of how things work and, you know, what level of risk they're actually at one point in time or not versus what the media tells them or what other people say, et cetera. So for things like quarantine and isolation, the mail, schedule laundry. I've talked to parents via email and phone. And I did this while exercising safe practices, the social distancing, wearing a face covering, frequent hand washing, all the things that I would expect my team member to do. And when my team could see me taking on the same items that I asked them to do, it was very clear that they felt like responsibilities were kind of just being thrown on them without care or concern for their well-being. And it started, you know, we're still a work in progress, but I think it shifted from this big scary thing to a little bit more of a manageable process and understanding what steps need to be taken. I think staff still needs time away. So it's very easy to feel at this point in time that we're needed and we need to keep running, but the reality of the matter is everyone has been running since March, pretty full steam ahead, and people can't exist on on nothing. They can't run on E. So they do need the time away, and that means trying to give a day off when I can give it, say, like, why don't you think about taking a longer weekend here or doing this? Where can I pull something off of someone's plate or redirect some of the workload to allow folks to kind of get a little room to breathe? And I try to find little ways to treat the staff, whether that's writing a note of appreciation, acknowledging really specific things that I've appreciated seeing in them, a growth that I've noticed over time. And, you know, for my team, I really appreciated seeing their level of teamwork. They found a lot of ways to show up for one another very consistently. And I love that when you could see when someone started slipping, somebody else would come up really quickly and say, like, let me take something off your plate. Let me, you know, pull a shift for you. Let me hold the duty phone, etc. So even when they're tired and run down, they're kind of balancing each other out. And then, you know, if you can afford to do it, I know I tried to go ahead and surprise everyone with like a $10 gift card to their favorite coffee place, and doing little treats and things along the way with, you know, finances not being great. I think at any college or institution, unfortunately, you can't always give everybody the bonus that you would want to give someone or weeks off or something like that. But I think staff seems to really appreciate the little steps along the way. And I try to really look at, I'm very fortunate to have excellent leadership at my institution. So I appreciate that my supervisors have checked in on me, have asked what I need, have encouraged me to take some time when it's able to be done, and have kind of followed up in showed appreciation for the things that everybody has been doing along the way. And I know everyone's working hard, so it kind of seems to go without saying, but it does mean a lot when your work is recognized. And it's always important to remember that. So I think we are close to about at 15 minutes, but that has been a little bit of my experience.
Great. Well, thank you, Christy, very much. If people would like to use the Q&A feature of the Zoom meeting of the Zoom webinar to ask questions, I will then ask them to our storyteller, to Christy. I did get a question that was sent to me through the chat feature. You mentioned that you would not ask your staff to do things that you didn't feel comfortable doing. Did you ever find yourself in a position where your college leadership, however, asked you and your staff to do something that was uncomfortable or that you didn't feel comfortable doing? And if so, how did you navigate that between those above you and your team?
Yeah, so I think a lot of things with the best of intentions sometimes are brought up when folks don't understand the full scope of what they're asking. So, one of the things that came up at one point in time was, how do you move a student who is positive for COVID-19 from where they currently are to the space that they're going to isolate in? And you don't really want that student running around all over the place, but it also, I don't believe it's the role of the RD to physically pack them up. And I think when it was initially set out, okay, the resident director could run to the building and run to the room and pack up their things. I think the reason why that was originally asked was because they were picturing a neat little bag waiting to just be carried away and dropped into, a basket. And I think I had to kind of make a little bit more of that experience realistic. What does a student room look like in the middle of the year? And it's not neatly packed up. It's not neatly arranged. This means going through students' underwear and picking up their things. Is that a fair question? So I was trying to make that a little bit more real for their experience. And I think as we step through what that looked like, and then recommending who else could help with these tasks as well, it started to see like, this is really something someone should personally do. And that would be a more comfortable experience for the student as well as the staff member. So I tried to go on just not what the benefits of my staff are, but also what is the student experience in that process and what does that look like? They're not easy to kind of get around these things. They're challenging conversations, but instead of just saying no, I just say like, let's break down what that looks like, to a more granular level, and to say, do we still feel comfortable with that ask?
Great, that's helpful. I think your need for transparency was evident. And something you mentioned earlier, right, is that this is the first time everybody was handling it. And so nobody's an expert. And so being willing to sometimes just educate others from your experience as the expert in the student experience and in housing and residential life is helpful. Another question that came in, how much face time in meetings were you and your leadership team providing to your team, balancing the need to be part of meetings with upper management and part of work groups related to COVID-19? We talk about Zoom fatigue, meeting fatigue. There's a lot of meetings.
So for FaceTime, I was going to say face-to-face, but I guess we're more camera to face at this point. If it was me, I met with my team every single week. So at minimum, we saw each other each week. If there was something coming up that I thought was going to be larger or a little bit more of a concern, I would have an additional meeting with the folks that it directly applied to if it need be. And I think once my staff saw me doing that, like, oh, we think we might turn your building into the isolation building and we might do that this week, I would actually contact the person and say, can we meet? I know it's a little later, but can we meet for about 15 minutes tonight so I can give you a little bit of a heads up? And that kind of helped things out. With leadership, they were really more available when I asked them to be available. So I also asked my team to be frank, like, do you feel like I'm giving you the information that you need, or do you need to hear this? And sometimes you need to hear it from the person themselves. You need to hear it from the vice president, from the AVP. You need to hear it from the epidemiologist. And those meetings were definitely less frequent. So I would say that they probably saw our AVP every few weeks, our vice president definitely at least once a month. And then we had some overall university meetings that came in, but they usually left the university meetings saying like, we already know everything because you told us that already.
Great, thank you. one question asks that the participant mentions that one thing they continue to hear from hall directors, particularly entry level, is that their morale is low. But realistically, everyone's morale is low this fall, this year. How do you currently increase morale for entry level professionals?
So yeah, I think I ask a lot of critical questions about morale altogether, like where is their morale, but also where do they expect it to be? If you expect this to be running as a typical year, you're likely going to be very disappointed with this experience. But we start getting to a little bit of the why. Do I feel like it's too much? Do I feel like I'm not supported? Do I feel like, you know, my peers in other offices are not doing quite as much? And like, how can I help attack like what the actual problem is to get to that piece? I know when we had a larger number of students, not a lot, but it was a number of students who were quarantined or at one point in time, my staff was getting run a little ragged. So we kind of sat down and reframed how we were working everything and switched it up a little bit. So one or two people weren't being run ragged, and instead the whole team was breaking up some responsibilities. And as that kind of shifted over there, like we can feel like us getting a little bit into a rhythm. So that helped. I think, again, it's just kind of acknowledging, and sometimes you just have to be that sympathetic and empathetic ear, that this is just a very hard time to be in, and that it's not necessarily quite as easy as we'd like it to be.
A follow-up to that, how do you keep your own morale up?
I am very fortunate. I've got a great family. So I actually live alone, but I chat with my siblings and my parents pretty frequently. I have great friends in the Boston area as well. For a while, we couldn't really see each other, so we were doing everything that we could, whether it was like house party, video chats, little cooking challenges, etc. And at the end of the day, I know I'm gonna get what I kind of give to my staff, so they need to see me authentically kind of keeping up the positive energy for them to keep that up as well. You know, I had gone into this meeting and I was almost in tears before it started. I was just like having a really rough day. I met with my team, and right after that, one of my team members sent in like this little, you can do it, little Emerson appreciation notes of how positive I am and how I keep everything so excited. And I was like, she has no idea. I was about to burst into tears at that point. But I also then shared that back with her of like, that really means a lot to me that you see that I'm trying to kind of keep that energy, and I really needed that day. And I think there's some of that vulnerability of showing that you're not always okay, but you're okay, you're willing to kind of keep pushing. That helps motivate your team.
Thank you. One of our participants asks you for your opinion. They have been working with staff, particularly one in particular, who has continued to basically feel overwhelmed and be in a bad mood. They have tried to show appreciation, offer help, take on some of their tasks, everything that you've mentioned, and it's still having difficulty and wants to make sure it does not turn into a negative relationship. Do you have other suggestions as to how to manage this relationship?
Yeah, I think it's tough. So I'm a very direct leader. So I have talked to my staff very clearly about radical candor and what they can expect from interactions with me, because I'm not always like sunshine and bubbles. I will say like, hey, I notice it seems like you're really down. Maybe that's not really common for you, and more so than usual, more so than maybe the situation would be. And I'm struggling in how to support you right now. So I'm more like, get it out there and hit it more directly. Especially if I feel like some of the things that I've been trying to do don't seem to be quite on par. And that sometimes helps give me better direction of what we can do, if we can do anything to support. And a piece of it is I ask my staff to be like very realistic. You might want X, Y, or Z, and you are likely not going to get some of those things. So I want to say, what can we do for you if we're unable to give you like, hey, I want to know what fall 2021 is going to look like. And I'm like, good, so do I. But I might not be able to map that out for you right now. What can we do to kind of help you? Like, what's your overall concern? Is this about the future of your position, and how can I help, guide that?
I think it's helpful to break it down into different aspects that they might be facing. Could you talk a little bit about how you use your staff at the mid-management level, so maybe assistant associate directors, and how you utilize them differently than your live-in staff?
Yes, I have the best associate director team on the planet. And they are absolutely incredible and amazing. So one of the things is I do try to empower both of my associate directors. They are leaders of our department. So I very much trust them, and I want their input, their feedback, I want to hear from them very regularly. We've been very good to set up. I've been very lucky that we set up a really positive, open communication type of relationship where they hold me accountable as well. And they'll say like, you told us to take a day off, but you haven't taken a day. So they are really the leaders of the branches of each of the area. When we're making decisions about what we need to do, I always talk with each of them about how does this impact your team and how can we work together, and like, okay, we have to get to this point, how do we get there successfully? So they are major partners in the process. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not connecting with either of them, because they are hugely impacted by this well. And they also spend a lot of the time directly working with our live-in team to work with that group to help keep that motivation. So it's really important that we're all on the same page. And I think that means high communication. And I try to involve them probably a little bit more so in some of the intricacies of how we got to where we're getting and what I think is going to come up, so I can make sure that their thoughts, opinions, reflections are kind of included in our decision-making.
Thank you. And I think we have time for the one last question, which I think is a great question to answer to end on because it's so important. And it's been really obvious throughout your entire story and the answers that you've provided so far, how you are a person-centered leader, which this attendee noted. They then go on to ask what strategies you'll continue to do to be able to support your team if and when this kind of current fog is lifted. Specifically, what examples can you share of ways you plan to support them as we are continuously faced with so many things personally and outside of work, racial injustices, the concerns for health and well-being, and so many other elements of our current society?
So I think a lot of what I can do to support my team also, it kind of links into how I advocate for them and their experience around our institution and around, our city. And it's hard to just focus in solely on, outside versus inside of work. But I would say in an inside of work area, I really try to work collaboratively with and challenge some of our campus partners to what we need for support from them. And it's hard because a lot of our partners are not able to be in person with us. So they can't deliver a meal, even though that would be really great. They can't do that. But I had asked them, I said, I hear a lot of really great suggestions, but what we really need now is some action-centered items of how folks can assist and not just suggest. By asking and kind of calling some things to action, I think I got better responses from what we needed of, I can do this for all the students who are in quarantine or isolation. I can't stop by, but I can host like a weekly support group. I can do this kind of events. I can do all these pieces. And I think our team is always excited to see that level of assistance and interaction with others, especially when it's meaningful. As far as like outside of work and what's going on in the world, I try to be a sympathetic ear. I try to contact our staff whenever anything is going on and see how they are doing. Because we're in the center of Boston, across from the Commons, that's actually a pretty popular location for large-scale events, rallies, protests, etc. And that means they're usually on the front line of whatever is happening because it's right across the street. So we also try to think about how to support them beforehand, during, and after, and what they need. And like sometimes I'm like, you may need to take a day, and it's okay to take a day. And one of my area coordinators said to me, like, Christy, you're not taking a day, and you're also a person of color, so I don't need to that. And I'm like, don't do that. I can tell from this conversation that you need to take a day, and that's okay. And I will take my time to process in my way as well. So we can kind of help balance each other out by also not enforcing this whole, like, you need to be a super person or superhuman to be able to kind of make it through, that it's okay to need it, to take a beat, to take a moment, to come back and be able to be a support for our students and the rest of our staff.
Well, thank you, Christy. I know that was a big question to end today's story on, and it's definitely one that also deserves more time and more attention. And it's something that we are all going to continue to think about and talk about and take action as we move forward within our profession. So I know you can't see all the participants, but I have no doubt they are giving you a round of applause right now. So thank you for sharing your story and providing some really poignant advice and some great tips. This has been recorded, so for those employers who are unable to make it, you can let colleagues and others know that it will be shared on our website. With that, just to give some folks a little bit more information about some other upcoming TPE programs, actually next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, we're doing a TPE Town Hall led by the TPE Committee, and it's really about somewhat of what the last question asked, about how do we continue to show up for work with so many other things, both inside our institutions, outside in the world, impacting and affecting our lives on a daily basis. And so our TPE committee will be moderating and leading that. And so I definitely encourage you and anybody else on your team to show up for that town hall if you're able to join us. And then we will continue to have 2 story shorts every month and be on the lookout for other events and initiatives from TPE. So with that, I'm going to end it here and just thank Christy very much for being a great storyteller and for everybody for joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.